Good morning. I'm Limo Taboi, the host of the MLF1 podcast. This week we have a special guest, Richard Wanjohi. My co-host Moses Kimibaro is on the road today, so we took advantage of having Richard in the building, and we're going to have a chat with him this morning.
Thank you, Limo. I think it's a pleasure to be here. I think this has been a labor of love for you, and I think we had conversations about this, and it's nice to be here.
Thank you, Richard. So we're going to go over 3 topics today. One about your history and F1, and then we'll discuss a bit about the controversial 2021 season and a bit about 2022. So Richard, tell us about yourself.
Okay, so I wear many caps. I keep saying this. My day job, I work at a business school, Strathmore Business School. I'm a researcher as well. I do market research on the, again, day job. But over and above that, I'm a sports enthusiast, write about sports, consume sports, do photography around sports, and basically just develop sports content. And I think that's why I'm here. So just to share my experiences in sports.
How did you get interested in F1?
I think back in the day, in the 1980s, there used to be something called Gillette World Sports Special. They used to bring snippets of different sports, and I think one of the highlights used to be the F1. So we'd always look forward to that, and I think the F1 used to be a special, especially for me and my younger brother, because we'd look out for the cars which are either crashing or, sort of having nose jobs at the corners, and we'd say this one is going to hit or this one is going to overlap, and, we'd always bet and say who's going to get out first of those races. There was also George Michael Sports Machine. They would bring snippets of it, but I think either when it was at the Indianapolis or when it focused on the American scene. So, that sort of whipped my appetite for motorsport, more so Formula One.
Cool. Yeah. What's your most memorable season? Who's your favorite driver and team at this time?
Okay, do we start with the present or with the past?
Past and present.
Okay, let's start with the past. I think for me, Nigel Mansell, the English driver, he was the sort of guy who stood out for me late 80s, early 90s. I think he won the 1992 season. 92
season, yes. He was the world champion.
So that was a crowning moment for me, because I'd seen his progress in the last 2 seasons, 1990 and 1991. So for me, it was just clear 1992 he was going to get that. And I think he also had a very good car. That was the
Williams.
Yeah. So I think they had sort of played their game well, and they had planned that. The next driver would be Senna. I mean, I always called him a flawed genius, because he came onto the scene, burst into the scene, and I wouldn't say I had foreseen his death, but I had sort of calculated this guy was just too good for the Formula One.
Wow.
He was either going to get an accident or something like what happened in 93 had happened. The next one, my current driver, of course, Lewis Hamilton.
Cool. Okay.
No inclination with the English drivers. I think it's just a colonial thing. For me, Lewis is because, again, he's black, and he sort of set the bar very high for a lot of these drivers.
Absolutely. Yeah. Have you been to any races?
Unfortunately, no. I think you and I know the cost of these races, and also, again, in the last couple of years, because of the prohibitions of travel around the world, it's been a bit crazy. But I think ideally either Abu Dhabi or Marina at Singapore.
Okay.
The second one being because it's a night race, and it would be very interesting to see that.
How do you watch races usually, and how have you been watching during the last 2 years of COVID?
2 years ago, 3 years ago, we bought a Fire Stick. We had sort of had that issue of pay TV streaming legally or illegally. And we used to have a lot of struggles, because I'm a sports consumer, and we'd fight a lot around that. So when we got to know about the Fire Stick, it became much easier for us, because then it becomes you consume only what you want, and that makes my life easy. That's how I've been watching the races in the last couple of years. So also 2021, because 2020, I think there was a start-stop situation where the season was cut into half, and I think how many races were there?
They had about 17. They managed.
Yeah, they managed, but it was a reduced season than the normal 2022 races.
But for you, there was really no change before and after COVID in terms of your viewing experience?
No, I think if anything, it got more interesting because I was indoors. So I'd almost program myself and make sure by the time the races are starting, I'm well positioned.
Okay.
Unfortunately for the Abu Dhabi race, the 2021, I don't know, for some odd reason, that race I couldn't find a place to sit. I had to just do it from my phone.
We'll come to that, yeah. As a sports business analyst, how would you estimate the reach of F1 in Africa and in Kenya in terms of viewership, in terms of interest?
I think F1, even in Kenya, is a very niche sport. It's not appreciated by a lot of the larger masses. It's part of motorsport, and even in motorsport, it's quite up there. So you wouldn't say it's a mass product. It's very niche. I think we even have clubs that show some of these races, but very exclusive and very few clubs. So in terms of reach, I would say it's maybe in the thousands or tens of thousands. Hence, again, because of the prohibitive nature of the sport, they wouldn't get a lot of people interested in it because, for example, the F1 app, you have to pay a subscription every month or every year. The way the races are structured, even in Europe, it's a pricey sport.
Okay, yeah. I see. Yeah. Now, last year, you got involved in a motorsports project. You were looking to discover people involved in motorsports and you wanted to collect some stories. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that project and how it's going.
Okay, so there was this call for, I would say, professional and academic publication. It's called Routledge. 2 leads on these professors in sports business. One is Professor Simon Chadwick. He's from the Lyon Business School in France. He's a well-written author in sports business. He's always commenting about sports. Every new event that happens, he has something to talk about, whether it's Formula One, whether it's the World Cup, whether it's Qatar and hosting of this current World Cup that is going to be there in November. He's an authority in sports business. And the next one was Hans Erik Nies. He's also from Norway, Scandinavia. He's also a sports business professor. Both of them are working on that book, The Business of Motorsport. Hans is more focused on motorsport. I think he's done quite a number of publications. So when the call for this came out, I reached out to them and told them with the reemergence of the Safari Rally and all that, I put in something and then look at the emerging markets, because then I want to look at Africa. I want to look at a bit of South America, Southeast Asia, and also what is happening right now in the Middle East, because some of the Middle East is still put as an emerging market. I don't know how that is.
Yes.
Yeah. So when I reached out and put my pitch and gave them the chapter that I would write about, they were like, yeah, well, when it's go, I just go right ahead. We are doing the first draft. I think by the end of this month, we'll have a review of about 14 days. So we sort of have Zoom sessions and say, okay, this is what is working, this doesn't work, this is not relevant, this makes sense. Then I think in another 2 months, we go now into proper publication. Then I think by the end of the year, we'll have the book out.
Have you found an interesting list of Kenyans involved in F1, in FIA administration, in the past or in the present, in your research?
For the FIA, I think I have the Surinder 30. I think he's a major player in this. And I think he's part of the reason that we got the Safari Rally and we were able to pitch, I think, 2-3 years ago. We also had a very heavy presence from the government. I think that was quite something. In terms of officials, I don't think there's anyone that comes to mind. I'll still try to get some more information, because the Safari Rally Limited currently, they have been very scanty with information. Okay. I think they're still trying to plan for the 2022 rally, so they've been sort of hands off on a lot of things.
Nice to hear that, because I think Surinder 30 has a bit of history in F1, and certainly long-term fans will remember his involvement a few years ago as a race marshal, and I hope we can talk to him later this season. This has been an interesting year for Kenya. The last 2 years, return of the classic Safari Rally and the Safari Rally proper itself. How has that reception been?
I think I'll start with the Safari Rally, because that has been a very, very tough project to get back into the circuit. We dropped off in 2002 going to 2003. Initially, the government then thought it was going to be a one-off, 1 or 2 years that will be out of the circuit. But then it became quite evident that we were going to be out for the longer term. More so because there were issues of safety concerns, the technical way the rally has become. It's no longer the long drives that we were used to in the early 2000s or 1990s. It also became very, it's closed circuit. It's not the open roads that we used to have in Kenya.
Yes.
So we'd have stages, for example, like what they did last year in Soisambu. During the day, we have 3 legs.
Yes.
Between 10 and 11, just an example, 10 and 11 or 10 to 12, the drivers go back to the service park, the cars are serviced, then they come back again for another 2-3 hours, back to the service park. By 6 o'clock, everything is done and shut. 3 days, and in Kenya we had a special one because we had the spectator stage at Kasarani.
Yes.
And that is one of the aspects that some of these rallies are trying to introduce so that they have greater appreciation and, just appealing to the masses. In Kasarani last year, I think we had almost 100,000 fans congregating there.
Wow.
And that was huge. I mean, it just tells you the appetite that we have for the sport. With regards to the works team and the manufacturers, I think a couple of them had come in quite early. Even with the pandemic, I think I started seeing crews as early as Feb of 2021. This was more so because they were looking at the whole setup from the drivers to the service parks, how they were going to negotiate those, or rather manage those logistics, because everything was trying to be put within a radius of 30 to 50 kilometers. And again, if you look at what we used to have back in the day, we'd have the rally starting from here, go to Mombasa, from Mombasa to Nakuru. Worst case scenario, they would reach Eldoret. But then that's not the case anymore. We come from Nairobi, we go to the service park in Naivasha, do a thing, come back, and the rally is done and dusted in Naivasha. For the classic safari rally, I think it has been running. It's just that it's been it's sort of a look back at what used to be the East African circuit, because they've tried to get both countries involved, Tanzania and Uganda. Uganda has not been easy because part of the area they run into is rebel held, or
Yes.
would have
Wow.
internal clashes, and then also because of the way the security apparatus is set up in Uganda. But Tanzania have been very accommodative, especially in the north, Moshi towards Kilimanjaro, then coming back into Kenya.
You wrote about the role which government plays in the sport, and I want you to maybe mention a few of the things which the government has had to do to bring back F1.
Yes.
And I think many older fans would think that, the Safari was the greatest rally and it should come back automatically, but that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
And then second, what has the role of the private sector been in winning back the Safari along with government?
Okay, so for the first question, I think the government was really deliberate in this. They were quite invested, both from the logistics perspective. We had the president going all the way to the FIA headquarters in Europe. We had Jean Todt come down. The beauty or the lucky thing about it is that Jean Todt is a former rally driver. He drove in the Safari in the 70s. So we had that going for us. He was bought with the rally coming back. But then because of his history of saying, okay, this is what we expect from the Safari rally, we cannot put special privileges for you because
I know Kenya.
Because I know Kenya.
Yes.
Everyone has to stick to those standards. I think 2 years ago, Argentina was dropped because of safety reasons.
Wow.
So we had to go through all those markers. How is your safety? How is your logistics? How is government involved, in terms of closing the roads, in terms of fund management, the infrastructure, if we shuttle guys from here to Naivasha, how is that going to be? At night, do we have safety wherever we are, even if we're in the bush? All those things had to be taken care of. And that took quite a process, because I think we started bidding for this in 2013. Immediately the current government came in. It has taken them almost 2 terms to get the rally back, because then we got confirmation in 2019. Unfortunately, 2020, the pandemic happened, which then forced the rally to come back in 2021. The private sector was also heavily involved, because then they had to invest on an actual office in Kasarani. That, I think, was with the help of some of the companies that either sent their staff or just supported the Motorsport Federation. We were lucky; we had Finas Kimathi, who's a hotelier who's been able to run a private business running the show there. So he's really put up proper structures and proper mechanisms in place. I think that was something they sort of discussed with the FIA, because we have to have a running office from the word go. The minute you end one rally, like what we did last year in June, the planning for 2022 is already in place, and that goes on, because then every year you assess and they say, okay, did you reach a certain critical level, and we might drop you because of this reason, either safety reasons, or maybe we did not get enough support for the manufacturers and all that. So in as much as, for example, we signed a 5-year deal in 2021,
yes,
it's still not guaranteed.
It's not guaranteed.
Yes, every year we'll have a review and they'll say, okay, yeah, you're good to go.
You went to Naivasha last year, and you'll tell us a bit about your experience. But for those of us who didn't go to Naivasha, it was a bit sad as a Kenyan, and knowing Kenya being Kenya, for us to see some of our Kenyan tendencies play out on the world stage, which was the Nakuru-Naivasha highway being blocked, and seeing works team crews walking in between Kenyans overlapping on the road. That was not a nice scene for us to see. Did it affect our review? What will change this year? It's good the rally will be there till 2026 if we perform. But will the rally ever expand to the old rally around Kenya, where you go to the coast, you go to Mount Kenya, Rift Valley, Western Kenya?
I think I'll take the last question first, about the expansion. As I said, right now it's a very technical rally. So you have between 10 to 15 kilometers, or at most 30 kilometers per leg. So the drivers come and test their car and do like 30 minutes and all that. Then they're back into the service park.
Okay.
So this thing of having legs in Nairobi, Eastern Province, coast and all that, that's gone. That will not change, because I think what the FIA has decided, because of the safety of the cars, the safety of the drivers, the technicalities involved, it's very start-stop situation. Okay. So you have a rally that goes between 10 to 12, take a break, 12 to 2, take another break, like that. This thing of going through circuits for a whole 6 hours or 8 hours, that's in the 90s and 2000s.
Yeah, I remember we would wake up in the morning and listen to the radio, and you discover who retired last night. Part of the drama was checking the newspaper to see the young kids cross out who was retired, who is leading now, who went off the road, had a technical thing. Yeah. But we're in a much more advanced state today.
Precisely.
Go ahead.
And this is because also on the backside of it, FIA has decided to sell motorsport, or the rally, as a very visual thing. So we have a lot of channels that are airing this, either live TV or recorded TV, and even the broadcast partners they have been very deliberate. I think last year we had only KBC, and they were showing only the highlights, because then that is a source of revenue for the FIA.
Yes.
So because of those reasons, you can't have a night rally. The visuals will not be as interesting. They'll be tricky. How do you set up the crew in the night, and it's in the bush?
Yes.
How do you do the live streaming? All those things. So they have to factor in some of those things, and that's part of the reason that they decided to have a short legs, and cut them and slice them and dice them.
What you mentioned just now about KBC, I subscribed to WRC for the month. I watched on the app, and it was very amazing to see. You could pick the car you want to follow, you could pick the camera shot, and you could follow the driver, see every stage, and it would keep changing from helicopter to in-car footage.
Yes.
And KBC, unfortunately, was not able to capture that. Can there be a richer experience for the casual fan who does not watch on the app this year?
Unfortunately, again, because of the way the investment has been into the sport by FIA and also the WRC, is that you'd have to either go through the app or live stream. And I think Safaricom had tried negotiating something in the works. I think that didn't work out. They also sponsored part of the media team that was doing the coverage and providing the internet, or the coverage for internet for the streams to happen. I think the question I've just remembered about the fan and engagement, and whether that affected future hosting rights. I think that was a surprise for everyone. No one thought, especially given it was pandemic times where we had curfews, where we had restrictions with movements. Everyone was surprised. Even we were surprised, because I remember we had to drive out on a Friday evening, try to beat the curfew, and by the time we get to Naivasha, it was crazy, because then Naivasha was not under curfew then.
Yes.
It's past 10 and everyone is still alive. Everyone is still looking forward to the next day. We wake up the next day, by 6 o'clock we're in Soisambu.
Yes.
It's mad traffic into the ranch, because then you have the special stage that starts at 8, but then they have to clear the track by 8:30. So they have cars coming through the track and telling guys, you have to move,
Yes.
you have to park like this, you have to be in this area, you can't move this space. And that's what I was talking about. The technical aspects of the rally have become very particular, and FIA is very particular with that, because you have the safety of the fans, you have the safety of the drivers, you have the safety of the crew, you have the filming crew, because I think there were like, by the time the first car was coming, I think we had like 3 choppers that had gone through the track itself, because they want to see everything is tip-top and, nothing wrong happens. So because of that, a lot of fans had expected what used to happen in the 90s. That was rude shock. And,
yes.
They'd be like, is that the first car? No, it's just a safety car coming on the track. Is that the first car? So like after like 3 or 4 cars, you tell guys, okay, just wait. They'll tell you when the official car is about to come. Yeah.
There are different fan expectations today with the new Safari versus the old Safari. And I think for some of us, we were shocked. And I think many people did not appreciate that who Michelle Mouton was. She's now an FIA official, and she was driving one of the pace official cars or the route cars, and marking the route, making sure it's safe. Is rallying, what can it do to connect with younger children, to younger fans? Because I think those who appreciate the Safari today are people who really knew it from before it disappeared from the WRC circuit. So what can the sport do to connect with newer fans?
I think the one major thing is the spectator stage at Kasarani. I think that's something that they can do and do it very well. Last year, unfortunately, we didn't have proper viewing areas. We had, I think, the main stand, the VIP stand was well positioned. The rest of the masses had sort of to find vantage points to view the car, so you couldn't see the whole track, in its entirety. And the beauty about a spectator stage is that you're watching 2 cars race against each other on the same track.
Yes.
So you see them flagged off and they go in different routes and, different directions. And, that whole experience it's something that reawakens even the younger child in you. And that's why I'm saying, if they're able to focus on that and make it worth the while, you don't even have to go to Naivasha. For those who can manage or afford to go to Naivasha, it's well and good. If they can invest more in the spectator stage, have fun experience, ensure the security, ensure the logistics. Because I remember we started streaming in at 10 a.m. and the cars were coming in at 2 p.m.
Okay.
So for a whole 5 hours, you're just gazing in the, emptiness and saying, okay, this will be a nice spot. This spot I can do photography. This spot, But if they make that worth the while, being present and being available for that stage, even for the younger kids, will be worth the while.
Okay, thank you, Richard. We look forward to the Safari Rally in the next few months.
June 25th to 26th, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And we're back to F1 today. You have cars on track out for the first time. We're coming in. We're looking at pictures of Lewis Hamilton walking into the circuit, and so many people having memories about last year and how the season ended. How was 2021 for you from the beginning to...
I think I'll quote someone who commented, I don't know, I think it was in some European publication. It was the best season in 40 years because we had Hamilton coming in as the reigning champion, looking for the 8th title. Verstappen had already shown us that he can do some stuff with the Red Bull. And the Red Bull car was, it was the car to beat from the word go.
Yes.
When we started seeing Verstappen win, then he had 2 or 3 wins, then Lewis and... we knew from the word go it was Hamilton versus Verstappen. The beauty about it is that we had to wait until the last GP to get the confirmation of who was going to win the race.
And the last minute.
Yes. Of the Abu Dhabi GP. And that's why I was saying, I don't know, I think it was a conspiracy of sorts. I couldn't watch that thing live. I think I was waiting like you, to do some recording and just trying to get it on the phone. And when we had what Hamilton said on that side, it's been what it is. I think for me, I'd wanted Hamilton to win the 8th title.
Yes.
Unfortunately, that didn't happen. I wouldn't say it's anything against the FIA, but I think there were also a bit of contentious calls from the officials, and especially on that race. And we've seen the consequences of what happened then. Over and above that, I think Red Bull proved themselves. And I think they'll be the team to beat coming into 2022. In 2021, we also had a retiree, Kimi Räikkönen.
Yes.
And that's when now we saw Bottas move from Mercedes to Alpha.
Yes.
And that will be an interesting prospect. 2021, I think, for me, it was just the 2 guys, Verstappen, Hamilton. Unfortunately, Hamilton didn't win his 8th, and that makes it interesting for 2022.
In your business, have you encountered many new fans recently of F1? Do you think Netflix, its Drive to Survive, has had an impact? And do you think that there are people who were put off by the way the Abu Dhabi race ended?
I think that's the beauty about sports and controversy. Anytime you have a controversy in sports, it sparks more than the ordinary fan, because then suddenly everyone else wants to know, okay, what has happened? Is it because Hamilton lost his car? What happened? Was it an accident? Was it something? So everyone wants to know the story about that. And,
yes.
That gives it wider appeal, and you're able to get even the uninitiated audiences. Part of the reason that I'm also a big supporter or huge supporter of Hamilton is because he cuts across different populaces.
Yes,
the black, the unusual white from the European circuits. That non-traditional driver give it a universal appeal and a wider appeal, and that has helped the sport grow.
I think, the way he always describes himself as a young kid, came from a middle-class family, not a motoring background. I think many drivers today are second generation or drivers who have some support, but he came from nowhere. His family literally bankrolled his career, and then he got into the Mercedes team, one of its early variants, and he always says he's driven for Mercedes his whole life, and he has his loyalty to Mercedes. And I think clearly he's the box office for F1 today. But do you think his fans were put off, his newer fans? Do you think they'll be back this year?
I think the hardcore fans will still follow him, because a lot of them expected he might retire, because they were like, if such an injustice in quotes is done unto you, then quit the sport. But for those who are true fans, or fans who go beyond just one performance or one race, we'll continue supporting him.
Okay.
If anything, I think 2022 will be as competitive, if not more competitive, because one, he's looking for his 8th title. Verstappen wants to prove a point and say, Red Bull got this. 2022
season is really, I think, in the second leg of its start. We saw the new cars coming out earlier this month. Mm-hmm. Today is the first time when the cars are on track. Not really racing, but at least guys can now spy on what the other guys have really come up with in their designs. Mm-hmm. What are your expectations about 2022? The new car designs, the larger tires. We'll come to the drivers in a minute.
I think the designs, are made, and that's why I like the Formula One, sort of officials, or the way they do their thing. Every season, you sort of tweak with the car, or with the mechanics around the car, the aerodynamics, the DRSs, just to sort of give an edge to the other teams, or a new team to put its play forward.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I'd still think Red Bull would be the team to beat. Mercedes will be right up there. I don't see any other team challenging Ferrari for you. Maybe we'll be in it, but I still think it's a Red Bull Mercedes affair.
I'm not giving a bias away, but I think, was there a bit of fatigue? If you look at this, the last 20 years, you had 5 years of Ferrari dominating, then you had a bit of Renault, then you had 2 odd years of really nobody, and then 4 years of Red Bull. And then we've had 7-8 years of Mercedes. And it was probably time for a change and a break. And I think Mercedes are the constructors' champions. They lost the drivers' title. But I think there's room for redemption there. And that's going into this season. Do you think Hamilton now sees this as a chance for redemption? If you look at his sporting idols, you had Muhammad Ali, for example, who used being stripped of his title controversially as motivation to come back. Twice in his career had to make big comebacks. Do you see a similar story for Hamilton playing out?
Precisely. Hamilton thrives on competition, on adversity, on situations where you're forced to go above the normal. The start of the season, at some point we were looking at it and seeing Verstappen 2-3 races in, we are thinking, okay, Hamilton has lost this.
Yes.
Mercedes have no clue what they're doing.
Exactly.
Halfway into the season, then Hamilton comes back. In the second half, it's almost Hamilton throughout. Yep. So he will use that. And, again, just the adversity and sort of saying, I'm coming back from a point of losing, or a point where guys, said, I'm done and dusted. And also because he wants to win the 8th title so that he becomes the greatest. I think that's the unfortunate thing about most of these champions. You still want one more to prove a point.
He came back so strong. I think in the last quarter of the season, I think at that point, really Red Bull looked like they had it. And then Hamilton just reeled off win after win after win and really was that strong that I think for most of the Abu Dhabi race, it looked like Red Bull had let it out, and then the last corner happened.
And if you look at some of the races, because there was this perception that unless Lewis is pole position, he will never win a race. In the second half, most of the races was coming from
he won from the back in Brazil.
The back,
yes.
exactly.
Yeah.
So he comes from the back, he gets into the middle, he takes the front, and he just takes off.
Okay.
Abu Dhabi, I think it was just a question of tactics. I think they just lost it because of the change of the tires, and I think that's where Red Bull now they had sort of gotten this to a micro level that they were like, if we change these tires within this circuit or within this, the safety car comes, we are done. The race is ours.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going into a 23 race season. Some tracks are coming back. Japan coming back. You have Singapore coming back. We have Australia in April. We pray they will happen this year. Qatar is out. Then you have Miami on the circuit for the first time. What's most exciting for you? Which track?
I'd still go with the bias of Singapore.
Okay.
I think because it's a night race.
We'll see you there. Yeah.
When does Singapore happen? By the way?
Singapore is October.
October.
Yes.
I might be in Singapore in October, so
good for you.
You never know. It's an interesting race because it's a night race,
yes.
as they say, and it's also one of those that you never know what happens. I think Hamilton has sort of aced it the last couple of times.
Yes.
Miami would be interesting because the US is always huge on motorsport, and I think Formula One is no exception. Australia is also good. It's nice to have them back. I think because of the pandemic, the sort of lockdown and situations of not allowing visitors. This would be an interesting circuit to watch again for this year.
Is there hope for an African circuit?
I was reading, I think last night or a couple of weeks ago, as part of my research for the project, and I saw South Africa. Interestingly, they're looking to be in the circuit 2023 or 2024.
Okay.
Yes, allow me. Yes.
I don't know. This government, I don't know if it's palatable. I think, they were able to sell the World Cup, but I think that was more of a broad supported sport. Going back to your first point about is F1 elite or have broad support. Mm-hmm. So you think South Africa has a serious bid?
They might get it right because I think we have quite a number of manufacturers down there. We have the BMWs, we have a couple of
Volkswagen,
exactly, huge manufacturers. In terms of space, I think most of those cities have huge tracks. We know about their, what do they call it, the drag racing, and so we have both an audience and capability or potential sponsors who can support the sport. But as you say, the government is what is the handicap, because people will be asking, is it a priority to have Formula One or, sort people in the economic situation?
Okay. Finally, we come to the 2022 drivers. I think the big story will be Russell taking Bottas' seat at Mercedes. Bottas going to Alfa. And racing alongside Zhu, the first Chinese driver in F1 in, I think, forever. And how do you think the new drivers will play out? Also the return of Alex Albon, who I think many people felt was unfairly removed for business decisions. But which of the new drivers and the new teams are most exciting?
I think I'd look at Bottas moving to AlphaTauri. I think he has a point to prove. In 2020, a couple of times he was told to slow down, so that they win the drivers, both the drivers and the manufacturer's title. But you could see he was pushing Hamilton to the limit. Last year, I think a few races he didn't get it right.
I think he has a point to prove.
He has a point to prove, being not considered for Mercedes, and now with AlphaTauri. The challenge is the car itself. It might be a bit of a stretch, and you never know what happens on any day. For Mercedes getting Russell, he was a huge supporter of Hamilton towards the last days of 2021.
Almost won in Bahrain. I mean, that would have been a shock, imagine.
Precisely. But I think he might not have what it takes to push, because Bottas was good. In as much as you want drivers to gel, you need some sort of tension between them. And I think that was what Hamilton and Bottas provided. That tension makes it interesting on the racetrack. But when you have one driver cheering the next one, then that competition is not there. For Red Bull, I think having both the
same
drivers, then it gives them an opportunity to prove that last year was not a fluke. And they might go for the manufacturer's title as well.
You think Zhu from China, how will he do? There is no Chinese race this year, but do you think this will now spur more interest in the sport?
I think the beauty about such countries and, such sportsmen, when you have an inkling of, or sort of an outlier like that, they get huge following in their respective countries. We've seen what has happened in, the Winter Olympics.
Yes.
Some of those guys were coming from very small countries or, unknown countries. But when you have such a guy, coming into the sport, and China is huge on Formula One, and part of the reason they've been able to get this. Yeah.
And we close with your predictions for the year. Drivers champion, constructors champion.
Drivers, I'd still think Hamilton will challenge for this. If he gets it right in the first half, then the title will be his for the keeping. He will be pushed by Verstappen because Verstappen is rough. He has what it takes.
He won't mellow out now that he's secured.
He won't mellow out. If anything, I think he'll be hard on the tracks than he was last year. Maybe we'll have a Ricardo, one Ricardo here, Bottas there, but largely still the two of them. Manufacturers, I think Red Bull will take it this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Richard, for a very educative session this morning. You can follow Richard at Wanjohi on Twitter, Limo Taboi as Bankelele, and we should rejoin with Moses in a few weeks when the sessions resume. Cars are on track. Go out, watch them on Supersport or the F1 app. They'll be out for the next few days, and we'll see you all in Bahrain on the 18th of March. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you to Semabox for the support this morning and for the Baraza Media Lab. We had a wonderful session, and come check it out on Riverside Drive, Nairobi.